Okay, what are you saying, people, and welcome back to the channel. Now today we're going to do a weekly forex analysis for you guys. So on the screen are the 12 pairs we'll be analyzing today. But before we get into the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on the video if you're feeling generous. If you haven't already, go follow me on my Instagram account. I'll leave the handle there, and also check out my Telegram channel. I'll leave that in the description for frequent updates throughout the week. So make sure to check all that out. Links will be in the description. But like I said, another weekly forex analysis for you guys. So let me stop talking and let's get into the video. First up, we've got Euro USD. Okay, so for Euro USD this week, we saw a slight push to the downside and then we saw a nice push back up again. I did say during my last weekly analysis video that we do expect to see a push to the upside for Euro USD and potentially go and test 1.2 and then potentially 1.21. We didn't quite get to 1.2, but we did see that nice push to the upside. You can see on the weekly time frame why we got that push. Previous weekly resistance, now turn weekly support around 1.19. See really nice resistance there. We got a breakout, flew to the upside, came back down to retest it, expecting that area to hold as support. As you can see, we've had a really nice bullish candle there, getting a lot of indecision there since we've got wicks to both sides, but we did close above that level, showing that price is holding above that on a weekly time frame. So we could actually see another push to the upside, the next weekly candle go and fill that wick to the upside and see that that continuation to the upside, potentially see that overall bullish trend here, give us a nice swing to the upside, because I do think long term Euro USD is probably going to come back to the highs here and potentially even create a higher high. So with all that in mind, I do think we could see a little bit of a pullback to start the week off, since we did have this bearish candle, so you could see price going to fill that wick to the downside. But I think if we do hold this level here, expect to see further continuation to the upside for Euro USD. So for next week, might see a bit of a pullback, maybe to around this level here. So I pull back to here and then see a nice push to the upside. We do have previous 4 hourly support and resistance in this area, so could see a push back into that area. If we do hold, I do expect to see another push to the upside into 1.2 and potentially 1.21 up there, which was the previous resistance which sent the market down in the first place. As you can see, we tapped into that level, fell all the way down. So I do think price can come back and test that resistance where we saw that really nice push to the downside from. But I do expect to see a bit of a fallback, bit of a pullback to fill that wick on the daily, and then expect to see further continuation to the upside and all the way up to 1.2 and then potentially 1.21. Next, we're going to take a look at USD JPY. Okay, so for USD JPY this week, we saw a push to the upside, price then retraced a little bit, found support, and continued to the upside towards the end of the week. You see on Friday there, really nice bullish close to the upside. So for this week, I did expect to see a bit of deeper retracement. However, as you can see, we didn't really retrace that much. I was expecting price to maybe come to test this area here around 107, prior resistance here. You can see that bearish candle, and then price just took off to the upside from this area. So I expected price to maybe retest this area before continuing to the upside, but as you can see, price is just far too bullish to pull back that much. Found support around 108,500 and looks like it's continuing to the upside. So I do think price can continue a little bit further to the upside here for USD JPY. We've got this last kind of major swing high here on the daily. So if I just point out that wick up there, you can see here we had a really nice push to the upside. Price found resistance from this area and just kind of tanked to the downside. So I think price could come around this area. So if I just put a highlight that area there, so I think price could come and test this area before pushing to the downside potentially. We do, however, have that weekly trend line which is still intact. So if I go to the weekly time frame, you can see first test there, second, third, and now we are testing that trend line there for a fourth time. I do still believe you can get a bit of a bearish reaction from this trend line. We could still break out potentially, but because the weekly chart is so overextended, you need to see a bit of retracement first before price goes and has a proper breakout of the trend line, so not a false breakout. So I think we could see a bit of a further push to the upside, maybe go and test that level there, which is the same level that I was talking about on the daily, and then see a bit of a deeper retracement from then on. So for next week for USD JPY, could see a bit of a further push to the upside, tap into that level around there, so around 109,500 or maybe 110 potentially, and then we see it start to see a deeper pullback for USD JPY. So probably expect to see further continuation to start the week off, come to this level here, and then could be looking for selling opportunities to take this down lower. And next we've got USD CAD. Okay, so for USD CAD this week, we saw a nice push to the downside. I did say last week during my weekly analysis, we do expect to see further continuation to the downside this week for USD CAD, back to lows and then potentially to 1.24. We did see a move back to lows here, but I do think we can push on further and go and test 1.24 after breaking out that consolidation there. As you can see on the 4H, all of this was just consolidation, just ready to break to the downside, and we saw that really nice break, and we are back at lows there. So I do expect further continuation to the downside for USD CAD into around 1.24. Might see a bit of retracement first back into that previous level of resistance, which kind of gave us the momentum to push the downside to the lows. So could be seeing a bit of retracement next week, since we did see quite a big push towards the end of last week. Bit of retracement maybe, and then could ride this back down to 1.24 or potentially even further, because again the higher time frames, daily, weekly, monthly, are still very bearish here. My overall target for USD CAD is around 1.23 or potentially 1.22. So I still think further continuation to the downside for USD CAD. But for next week, I'm expect to see a bit of a pullback to retrace some of that bearish momentum that we had towards the end of last week. So a bit of a pullback, then further continuation back down to 1.24. Up next is Euro GBP. Okay, so for Euro GBP here on the daily chart, you can see for this week we saw price just roll over to the downside. I did say last week we do expect to see Euro GBP back to lows again. I think we're trading around here. Like I said, we'll probably expect to see Euro GBP roll back over to the downside and just continue that bearish trend. Then towards the end of the week, we're just kind of just consolidating, moving sideways. Really not much happening there for Euro GBP. So right now on the higher time frames, if I just jump to the weekly, actually we're currently at a really key level here in the market, which I think probably decides where your GBP wants to go for the next couple of weeks slash next couple of months. So we're testing this key level here, which is around 0.855. And if you break below this level and hold, I do think we'll come all the way back down to lows, which is on 0.83 or potentially even further for Euro GBP. However, if we do hold this area, I think we can see a push back up to 0.87 and potentially even higher, which is this key support here in the market. So at that point, we'll probably just have a bit of a range between these two key levels and just seeing which one breaks first. Breaks to the upside, could see a bigger push. Breaks to the downside, back to 0.83. So for Euro GBP, we're currently holding at that support there, you can see on the weekly chart. So if we do hold that and continue hold it throughout the whole of next week, at that point could actually see a push back up to 0.87, which is that resistance there, and then potentially a lot further. However, if we just see Euro GBP drop to the downside and hold below that 0.855 level, expect to see further continuation to the downside and just expect to see this overall bearish trend just continue a lot further. So we're holding a key level here, which is that 0.855. So just see how price trades along there at the start of the week, and if it's showing signs that we're going to push to the upside and it's holding, can be seeing a nice push back up to 0.87. Okay, so up next we've got AUD USD. Okay, so for AUD USD this week we saw a really nice push to the upside. I did say last week we do expect to see a move into 0.78 from this area of support here, and as you can see, we did see that really nice move to go and test that 0.78 level. You can see we were holding that trend line last week, and also we had that confluence of that price structure here. Really nice support there in the market, held us there nicely, testing that same support area again, and we saw that move into 0.78, which was our previous swing high in the market. As you can see, previous swing high before we created that new high there. We tested it to the downside, we tested that resistance, fell to the downside, held that support on that trend line. So from then on, we expected to see a push back up to that around about that 0.78 resistance level. So we saw that push, and now we'll kind of just trapped between these two levels, and just depends which way price wants to break out can determine the direction for AUD/USD for the next coming weeks. So if you break to the upside for AUD/USD past that 0.78 barrier next week, and we do hold, expect price to probably come back to highs again. And if you do see a swing back down and price breaks through the trend line and the support, holds as resistance, can actually see a move back down to 0.74 and potentially a lot further. So kind of at just trapped between very key levels here in the market. So for next week, can probably expect to see a swing back down again, since we're holding just between those resistance and that support. So if I actually go back to the daily, so probably see a swing back to the downside again, back into that trend line, back into that support. And if you do hold again, just see price just range between these two levels, and until we see that breakout to the upside or the downside, can just expect to see a bit of a range for AU between those two levels. A bit like what we had here, price was just ranging between that resistance and that support before breaking to the downside. So just could be trading between those two levels, and then until we see a breakout to the upside, you know that price coming back to highs, break to the downside, could ride down to 0.74. Now let's take a look at NZD CAD. Okay, so for NZD CAD this week, we saw a bit of retracement and then prices continued to the downside there. You can see Thursday's candle retested that prior support and now-term resistance. I did say expect to see a bit of retracement back into this area here. And as you can see, we tapped into that previous swing low of the market before creating that new swing high. So that was our new resistance. We tapped into that and then fell to the downside. So I did say last week, expect to see a bit of retracement back into this level, then expect to see a move back down to 0.89 and potentially even further. So 0.89 is this level here, so I still do think we can see further downside potential for NZD CAD. You can see that very strong bearish close there on the daily and also on the weekly time frame. If I jump to the weekly, you can see how bearish we're looking here on the weekly. So we are still looking very bearish here. Very strong bearish candle last week, another strong bearish candle this week. So I think we could see a little bit further downside potential for NZD CAD, but do take to note that we do have this level here, which is our prior resistance, which will be acting as support. So could actually see that move into 0.89 and then potentially see prices go bounce straight back up if it does hold that area. But overall, we can see the market is turning bearish and does have a lot of bearish momentum on the higher time frames like the weekly and the daily. So could see a little bit further push to the downside, maybe to that 0.89 level, and from then on could actually see a push all the way back up to 0.891. So for next week, expect to see a little bit more of a push to the downside, tap into 0.89, and then from then look to ride that back up potentially to around 0.91. Next up, we've got GBP NZD. Okay, so for GBP NZD this week, not too much happened. Again, just a lot of indecision there on the daily and the lower time frames, just consolidating. I did expect to see a push to the downside this week for GBP NZD, since it does look like we're finding a bit of a top there, since we're struggling to create higher highs. We've got a lot of wicks to the upside, prices failing to push on past 1.94, so could see the market take a bit of a breather and drop to the downside to around 1.92 and potentially 1.91. So right now we have this inside bar here, which is acting as a bit of a range for us, giving us that consolidation. So we've got the highs and lows of that inside bar, and as you can see, price is struggling to close below or above that level. So if you do see a daily close below that box, can we start to see a pretty nice push to the downside for GBP NZD and potentially go and test that 1.92 level or potentially 1.91. We also do have this trend line here in the market, which we could actually see a fifth test of this trend line potentially. So again, first, second, third, fourth, could actually see price push to downside and go and test that trend line again. And if we do see a reversal in the market, we'll probably have to see a break of that trend line, and from then on we could actually see GBP NZD all the way fall all the way to the downside, all the way back to the lows. But again, that's a bit more longer term. So for next week, we're still in this box for the start of next week, so we can expect to see a bit more consolidation for GBP NZD. And then if we do get a daily close at some point in the week above or below, we could see a breakout in that direction. So close above, could see a breakout to around 1.96 or even further. Close to the downside, which is the move I'm favoring. Close underneath that box, could see a nice fall to the downside back to 1.92 and then potentially 1.91, and again potentially go and hit that trend line as well. So favoring for a move to the downside, but right now we still got consolidation here for GBP NZD. Next, we're going to move on to CAD JPY. Okay, so for CAD JPY this week, we saw price kind of just continue to take off to the upside. I did say last week it does look like we're having a breakout on the weekly time frame, so we can actually expect to see further continuation to the upside for CAD JPY, and my overall target is 88 for CAD JPY, which we're actually almost reaching there, which is this level here. So I go to the weekly time frame, which is kind of the time frame that I'm using for direction right now. You can see we do have this key level here of support and resistance, so really nice support there, resistance we broke and had a really strong close above that level. So it looks like we're having a breakout to the upside. So I did say last week, if you are having a breakout now, can expect to see further continuation to the upside. I did expect to see a bit of retracement first, come retest that and hold as support, but we didn't see that, and we just saw price just take off to the upside and continue to be bullish. So I do expect to see a push to 88, which is this level around here, which is our prior resistance, which did send us to the downside quite sharply. So we're almost at that 88 level, so I could expect to see CAD JPY continue a little bit further to the upside, test around that 88 level, and then start to see a bit of retracement. But you can see here, even on the weekly, we're very overextended to the upside, and do expect to see a bit of a deeper retracement. And again, daily we are quite overextended as well. So for CAD JPY, I could see a little bit further of a push to the upside to around that 88 level, and then potentially from then could be looking for selling opportunities if you do get some bearish signs, and look to ride that back down, because right now price is very overextended and we could see a really nice drop to the downside for CAD JPY. So for next week, expecting to see that 88 barrier hit, and then if you do hold, could see a nice push back down to the downside. Up next is GBP USD. Okay, so for GBP/USD this week, we saw a really nice push to the upside. I did say last week during my weekly analysis, we do expect to see a push to the upside this week for GBP/USD into around 1.4. Again, we did see that nice push this week. We were holding this trend line here in the market. So again, you can see really nice push to the upside from that level there. Again, and then a fifth time this week. So price is looking like we could be seeing another push back to high, since the overall trend for GBP/USD, even on the higher time frames, monthly is starting to become bullish, weekly and daily is still very bullish to the upside. So can expect to see further continuation to the upside, but there's one important level that we need to break through here on the 4H time frame, which is this 1.4 level of resistance. So a key level of resistance which price keeps testing and keeps getting rejected. So it's a strong barrier and it is holding. So can expect to see a bit of consolidation for GBP/USD next week, just between this trend line and that resistance, and until we see a breakout, I'm not too sure about direction here for GBP/USD. So a break of that trend line, you probably want a daily close and hold. If you do hold that trend line now as resistance rather than support, and we see that breakout, can expect to see a bigger drop to the downside to around 1.37 for GBP/USD. However, if we don't, and we actually see price break to the upside, hold above that 1.4, can expect to see price come all the way back to highs again, back to 1.42, and potentially you can create a higher high and maybe test 1.43. So GBP/USD right now kind of just stuck between that resistance and that trend line, and just need to see which way price wants to break out to for GBP/USD. So a bit hard to trade in this area here, but if you do see a break of that resistance and hold, it becomes a lot clearer, and from then on can be looking for buys and ride that back to the highs for GBP/USD. And next we're going to see what's happening with GBP CAD. Okay, so for GBP CAD this week, we saw a really nice push to the downside. I did expect to see price go and test 1.74, but as you can see, price has gone taking that level out, and it's still looking very bearish, closing below it. So GBP CAD last week was kind of stuck between this area here in the market, so that 1.74 barrier, and we're stuck just below this level here of resistance, 1.76. So we went and go and test that level there. We saw those wicks rejection, saw a nice move to the downside, broke through that 1.74 barrier, and actually closing very strongly below. So I do feel like GBP CAD can see further continuation to the downside, since the daily, weekly is starting to look quite bearish now. So I do think for GBP CAD we could see a move into 1.72, which is this support here in the market. So for next week, could be looking for a bit of retracement, maybe back into 1.74 level. Really nice place to look to take a short trade, and then look to write it down back into 1.72. You can see all the resistance here in the market, really key here for GBP CAD. So can expect to see a bit of retracement for next week, since we did see all that bearish momentum, but from then on could look to ride that down and continue to around 1.72, and maybe even further if the momentum is very strong and we break through that 1.72 barrier. But I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So for now, GBP CAD, my bias is to the downside. Do expect to see a test of 1.72. Potentially could actually see prices open up and continue to the downside, since we have all that bearish momentum. And if that's the case, could look to actually take a buy trade from 1.72, then we ride that back up to 1.74. So got that range here between 1.74 and 1.72, which is around 200 pips, a little bit over. Could look to take buy trades from that 1.72 back up to 1.74, or vice versa, 1.74 after a bit of retracement back down to 1.72. So we've got those two key levels, which I think price is just going to trade between for the next couple of weeks. And up next, we're going to take a look at gold. Okay, so for gold this week, we saw a really nice bullish reaction. I did say last week, do expect to see a bit of further continuation to the downside back into 1680. And as you can see, we had that confidence of this trend line here in the market. So first, second, and now we have that third test, and also a really key level 1680 is for gold. So if I just go across, you can see all this resistance and support. You can see a really nice reaction to the downside, held a support, bit of consolidation, then broke to the upside and flew all the way up to the 2000s. So price respects 1680 quite well previously, and we did expect to see a bit of another bullish reaction here for gold. And as you can see, we tapped into that level and saw a nice push to the upside. So I still do stand by gold getting back up to that 1770 level, which is this prior support here. Really nice support, nice push to the upside, again support there as well. So I do still think we can go and retest that as resistance now. Whether we might see price fall back to the downside again or break above, not too sure about that. Again, probably analyze that when we get to that, but right now gold is kind of just trading in between that support and that resistance up there. I do think we can see a nice bullish reaction back into 1770, and then if you do hold, probably see price fall back down again. However, if you do see a breakout, could actually see price take off to the upside and go a lot further. So gold for next week could see a bit of retracement at the start of the week off, but I do think we can see further continuation back into that 1770 level, price support, now term resistance, and see a nice push into that level. And last but not least, we've got Bitcoin. And last but not least, we have Bitcoin. So for Bitcoin this week, we saw further continuation to the upside. We've actually gone and tested that 60,000 target there. I did say last week we do expect to see further continuation to the upside for Bitcoin and go and test that 60,000 mark if we get above 51,000. As you can see, we had that really nice breakout past 51,000, held above, and price just continued to the upside. So right now Bitcoin is looking very, very bullish here. All technical aspects of it is looking very bullish, and it is showing signs that it wants to continue and now go and set a new target. So I do think the next target could be around 65,000 now for Bitcoin, potentially even higher than that. Again, you see we just had that big push to the upside, breaking past that previous swing high here in the market. So do expect to see a bit of retracement now for Bitcoin, since we just had that big push reaching 60,000. And if you do hold that 58,000 mark, then from then on can see price just continue to the upside and go set some new highs there for Bitcoin. However, if we get back below this area now, back below that 58,000 mark and hold, then we could actually see a bigger push to the downside, since we didn't really retest this 51,000 mark. We saw prices break to the upside, pull back there, and then continue. So we didn't really see that retest. So that retest could still be possible if price wants to hold above that 58,000 mark. You can see previously when we tested it, we did see a big push to the downside. So if you do get back below that 58,000 mark, holds of resistance, could actually see that retest happen. However, price is still looking very, very bullish here, and I'm more leaning towards price just pulling back, retesting, and then just continue to the upside and going setting some new highs. So Bitcoin next week, expecting to see further continuation to the upside. But however, if you do see price fall and hold underneath 58,000, can be expecting price to fall a lot further. Okay, so that is the end of the video. I hope you all appreciated and enjoyed that. If you have any questions, you agree or disagree with my analysis, just drop it down in the comments. I'll make sure I'll get back to you guys. So thanks again for watching, and until the next one, I will see you guys later.